Most people believe that reacting proves strength. They believe speaking instantly shows confidence, that defending themselves immediately shows courage, that raising their voice shows authority. But what if the opposite is true? What if reaction is not strength but surrender? Watch closely the next time someone challenges you. Notice how quickly your body shifts, your tone sharpens, your mind races to defend, correct, justify. It feels powerful in the moment, it feels honest, it feels real. But strength is not measured by how fast you respond. It is measured by whether you needed to respond at all. Most people never realize this. Reaction is the easiest thing in the world. It requires no discipline, no pause, no thought. It is instinct, and instinct, left unchecked, is not mastery. Emotional expression is often mistaken for authenticity. Yet authenticity without control becomes volatility. You say things you later regret. You damage relationships you meant to protect. You weaken your position in rooms where composure would have strengthened it. The hidden cost of reacting is subtle at first. A strained conversation, a defensive email, a tense evening. But over time the cost compounds. Reputation shifts, trust erodes, opportunities narrow. You may still believe you are in control, but your reactions tell a different story. Contrast this with the individual who does not react immediately, who pauses, who absorbs tension without surrendering to it. From the outside, it may look passive. In reality, it is disciplined. Stopping reaction is not suppression. It is governance. It is the deliberate refusal to let external triggers dictate internal behavior. If you want to change your life in a meaningful way, begin here. Not with productivity hacks, not with external goals. Begin with the discipline most people avoid. Stop reacting. Consider how a single day unfolds for someone who lives in reaction. The alarm rings late. Already, irritation forms. Traffic is heavier than expected. A driver merges too closely and your hands tighten around the steering wheel. The mind begins narrating. People are careless. No one respects anyone anymore. By the time you reach your destination, the day feels unfair. You open your phone before work. A comment challenges your opinion. It is not even personal, yet it feels like it is. Within seconds, you are drafting a response. Your heart rate rises. You replay their words, searching for disrespect. 10 minutes pass. Energy has been spent. The mood has shifted. At the office, a colleague questions your proposal in a meeting. The question may be reasonable, but the ego hears accusation. You interrupt. You over-explain. You attempt to regain control through force of tone. The room grows tense. Later, you replay the moment, wishing you had handled it differently. The pattern continues at home. A partner makes a careless remark. You interpret it as criticism. Instead of pausing, you counter. The exchange escalates. Pride replaces understanding. What began as a minor comment becomes emotional distance. Notice what actually shaped this day. Not disasters, not betrayals, not irreversible losses, small triggers, ordinary moments. Yet those small moments dictated posture, tone, energy, and outcome. Reaction quietly steered behavior again and again. Most people live this way without naming it. They assume stress is inevitable. They assume conflict is normal. They assume that reacting is simply part of being human. But the accumulation of these reactions defines character. Every defensive reply strengthens defensiveness. Every angry outburst reinforces anger. Every impulsive decision teaches the mind that immediacy is survival. Over months and years, this reactive pattern does not merely affect moments. It shapes identity. It affects reputation at work. It affects intimacy at home. It affects self-respect when you are alone. And here is the unsettling truth. If minor triggers can direct your mood, then your life is being quietly directed by forces outside you. At some point, philosophy becomes necessary, not as abstract thought, but as intervention. Because unless reaction is interrupted, nothing else changes. Long before modern psychology described emotional triggers and cognitive distortions, the Stoics observed something remarkably precise about human behavior. Epictetus, a former slave-turned-philosopher, began his teachings with a distinction that remains radical. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. This was not abstract philosophy, it was a diagnostic tool. He understood that most suffering begins when we confuse the two. What is up to us? Our judgments, our choices, our responses. What is not? Other people's actions, their opinions, the tone of their voice, unexpected events, economic shifts, delays, criticism. When we attempt to control what is not ours to command, frustration becomes inevitable. Epictetus went further. Men are disturbed not by things but by the views which they take of them. Notice the precision. The disturbance does not originate in the event itself. It originates in interpretation. Someone questions you in a meeting. The event is neutral. The interpretation, they are attacking my competence, creates anger. Marcus Aurelius echoed this in his Meditations. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. He was not denying emotion. He was identifying its source. The mind assigns meaning. Meaning generates feeling. Feeling drives action. The reactive person assumes the event caused the reaction. The governed person recognizes that judgment intervened first. This is the dividing line between impulse and discipline. Reaction is automatic acceptance of first interpretation. Governance is examination of that interpretation before acting. The Stoics did not teach suppression. They taught scrutiny. They believed that freedom begins when you question your own mental narrative. When insult arises, ask, is this truly harmful? When failure occurs, ask, is this permanent or is this feedback? When delay frustrates you, ask, what exactly has been taken from me? The difference between reacting and governing is not external circumstance. It is internal authority. Most people live as if events control them. The Stoic lives as if interpretation is his responsibility. The shift is subtle, but transformative. Once you see that reaction is rooted in judgment, you realize something unsettling and empowering at once. The trigger may not be yours to choose, but the meaning always is. And meaning determines everything that follows. Understanding the Stoic distinction between events and judgments is clarifying. But clarity alone does not dissolve impulse. The reason reaction feels so automatic is not philosophical weakness. It is biological design. The human brain evolved to detect threat quickly. Long before boardrooms and comment sections existed, survival depended on rapid assessment of danger. A sudden movement in the bushes required immediate response. There was no time for reflection. That ancient wiring still operates inside you. Today the threats are rarely physical. They are social. A critical remark, a questioning tone, a dismissive look. Yet the brain does not sharply distinguish between physical and social threat. When status, belonging, or identity feels challenged, the alarm system activates, stress hormones increase, heart rate rises, breathing shortens, attention narrows. The emotional centers of the brain become dominant. In that state, reaction feels urgent and justified. You are not consciously deciding to defend yourself. Your nervous system has already moved toward defense. The ego intensifies this process. Its purpose is to maintain a coherent sense of self. When someone challenges your competence, the ego interprets it as a threat to identity. It seeks restoration. It wants to reassert control, reclaim status, reestablish certainty. It does not pause to consider whether the reaction aligns with long-term values. Dopamine plays its part as well. When you respond sharply, especially in confrontation, there's often a brief surge of reward. You feel momentarily powerful. The tension releases. That relief becomes reinforcement. The brain learns that reacting reduces discomfort. Over time, this reward loop strengthens impulsive patterns. Cognitive distortions add another layer. The mind fills in gaps quickly, often inaccurately. It personalizes neutral events. It assumes hostile intent. It exaggerates consequences. A simple disagreement becomes disrespect. A delayed reply becomes rejection. These distortions occur so rapidly that they feel like facts rather than interpretations. This is why reaction feels natural. It is supported by biology, reinforced by reward, and justified by distorted perception. Yet here is the empowering truth. Biology explains impulse, but it does not excuse it. The same brain that generates rapid reaction also possesses the capacity for reflection. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning and regulation, can override immediate impulse, but only if it is engaged. The Stoics, without access to neuroscience, recognized this dynamic through disciplined observation. They trained themselves to insert a pause between event and response. Modern research confirms that even a brief pause allows the reasoning centers of the brain to regain influence. When you understand the machinery behind reaction, you stop personalizing it as weakness. You see it as conditioning, and conditioning can be retrained. Impulse may be automatic. Mastery is deliberate. Imagine two individuals standing in the same moment. Both receive criticism in front of others. The first reacts instantly. His voice sharpens, he interrupts. He defends his position with urgency. Even if his argument is correct, something subtle is lost. The room senses instability. Authority weakens. The second listens. He pauses long enough to separate tone from content. If the criticism holds truth, he acknowledges it calmly. If it does not, he responds without agitation. The same situation, two entirely different impressions. One appears fragile, the other appears composed. Consider insult. The reactive individual meets hostility with hostility. Pride feels temporarily satisfied, but the exchange escalates. Observers remember the volatility, not the justification. Over time, this pattern becomes reputation. The disciplined individual recognizes that insult reveals more about the speaker than the target. He chooses whether the moment even deserves response. When he does speak, his tone remains measured. His restraint projects strength. Now examine failure. A project collapses. The reactive mind searches for external blame, market conditions, unfair treatment, incompetent colleagues. Frustration spreads outward. Lessons are obscured by emotion. The same mistakes quietly prepare to repeat themselves. The disciplined mind turns inward first. Not toward self-condemnation, but toward accountability. What can be improved? What was within my control? Failure becomes instruction rather than injury. Growth becomes possible. Under sustained stress, the divergence widens further. The reactive individual grows impatient. Decisions become rushed. Relationships strain. The disciplined individual slows down when pressure rises. Stress becomes a signal to increase composure, not abandon it. At first, the difference between reaction and discipline appears small. A few seconds of pause, a slight adjustment in tone. But over years, those seconds accumulate. One path builds cycles of regret and conflict. The other builds credibility and quiet authority. This contrast is not about personality. It is about training. Weak reaction is automatic. Disciplined strength is cultivated. And the uncomfortable question remains: when pressure arrives, which version of you consistently shows up? If disciplined response is so powerful, why do so few people develop it? Part of the answer lies in culture. Modern life rewards immediacy. Social platforms amplify outrage because outrage captures attention. The faster and louder the reaction, the more visible it becomes. Instant gratification conditions the nervous system to avoid discomfort. When irritation appears, we discharge it immediately. Validation seeking intensifies the pattern. Many identities are built around being right, being heard, being acknowledged. When that identity feels threatened, reaction becomes defense. The ego interprets restraint as weakness. It whispers that silence equals submission. So we speak quickly, not because it is wise, but because it protects self-image. Outrage culture further normalizes reactivity. Anger is framed as authenticity. Emotional volatility is reframed as passion. Measured restraint is sometimes criticized as detachment. In this climate, discipline appears unnatural. But unnatural does not mean impossible. It means uncommon. Few people ever develop the ability to pause before reacting. Fewer still sustain it consistently. The discipline requires tolerating discomfort without immediate discharge. It requires allowing criticism to exist without instant correction. It requires witnessing emotion without obeying it. Most people do not practice this because it feels counterintuitive. The impulse says act now. Discipline says wait. The impulse says defend. Discipline says examine. The impulse seeks relief. Discipline seeks alignment. To step away from reactivity is to step away from the herd. It means choosing governance over instinct. It means valuing long-term authority over short-term satisfaction. And this is precisely why the discipline changes everything. Because while reaction is common, mastery is rare. Understanding the problem is important. Understanding the philosophy is clarifying. But transformation requires structure. The Stoics did not rely on inspiration. They relied on disciplined practice. If you want to stop reacting, you need a system. The first step is trigger awareness. Reaction always begins with a signal: tightness in the chest, heat in the face, rapid internal dialogue. These sensations are early warnings. Most people miss them and move straight to expression. Discipline begins by noticing the shift. For example, when a colleague questions your competence and irritation rises, that sensation is not weakness. It is information. Awareness interrupts autopilot. The second step is cognitive separation. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by events but by our judgments about them. When something happens, pause long enough to separate fact from interpretation. The fact may be, he challenged my proposal. The interpretation may be, he is undermining me. That distinction matters. By reframing the event as neutral data rather than personal attack, you create space for rational choice. The third step is emotional delay. Even a few seconds can alter outcome. Slow your breathing. Let the surge pass. In traffic, instead of accelerating to retaliate, ease your grip and count your breaths. In conversation, allow silence before responding. The nervous system begins to settle when it is not immediately fed by reaction. The fourth step is reframing control. Ask a precise question. What is within my authority right now? You cannot control the tone someone used. You can control your tone. You cannot control a client's rejection. You can control your professionalism. By shifting attention to what remains governable, frustration loses intensity. The fifth step is virtue alignment. The Stoics believed virtue, wisdom, courage, temperance, justice, was the highest good. Before acting, consider which response reflects character rather than ego. Wisdom chooses clarity over defensiveness. Temperance chooses restraint over escalation. Justice ensures fairness even when pride is provoked. Courage allows you to remain steady in discomfort rather than flee into impulse. The sixth and final step is deliberate action. After awareness, separation, delay, reframing, and alignment, you choose your response consciously. Sometimes that response is speech. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is a measured boundary. The key is that the action emerges from governance, not reflex. Consider a relationship disagreement. Trigger awareness catches the rising frustration. Cognitive separation distinguishes tone from intention. Emotional delay prevents sharp words. Reframing asks what outcome you truly want. Virtue alignment guides fairness. Deliberate action replaces escalation with clarity. With repetition, this framework becomes internalized. The space between stimulus and response grows. What once felt automatic becomes manageable. Discipline transforms from effort into habit. Stopping reaction is not about suppressing emotion. It is about inserting structure between impulse and behavior. And structure is what turns philosophy into lived strength. Philosophy proves itself in ordinary moments. The discipline to stop reacting is not tested in silence and solitude. It is tested in meetings, messages, arguments, and pressure. At work, someone interrupts you mid-sentence. You feel dismissed. The reactive impulse is to speak louder, to reassert dominance immediately. Instead, awareness catches the surge. You pause, you let them finish. Then you respond with precision. Let me clarify my point. The room senses composure. What could have become tension becomes authority. On social media, criticism arrives without context or nuance. A comment questions your intelligence. The ego wants to correct, defend, win. But you ask, is engagement necessary? What outcome serves me? Sometimes discipline means responding calmly. Sometimes it means not responding at all. Energy preserved becomes power redirected. In relationships, tension often escalates through speed. A partner's tone feels sharp. You interpret it as accusation. Reaction says counterattack. Discipline says pause. Ask what is actually being communicated. Instead of escalating, you say, "Help me understand what you mean." The trajectory shifts. Conflict becomes conversation. Financial stress introduces another test. Unexpected expenses arise, anxiety builds. The reactive mind catastrophizes. This will ruin everything. Discipline interrupts the narrative. Separate facts from fear. Identify what can be controlled. Budget adjustments. Communication. Planning. The stress does not vanish, but panic no longer dictates behavior. Parenting pressure magnifies emotion. A child refuses to listen. Frustration spikes. The instinct is volume. Discipline invites steadiness. Lower your voice instead of raising it. Model the control you wish to teach. Over time, that consistency shapes not only your character, but theirs. In each of these scenarios, the external event remains unchanged. Disrespect may still occur. Criticism may still appear. Stress may still arrive. The difference lies in interpretation and response. This is where discipline becomes visible, not in grand gestures but in restrained ones, not in domination but in deliberate choice. And as these choices accumulate, something deeper begins to form. Control stops being situational. It starts becoming identity. Techniques can be practiced, systems can be memorized, but the true transformation begins when stopping reaction is no longer something you try to do. It becomes who you are. There is a difference between managing impulses occasionally and embodying governance consistently. The former is effort, the latter is identity. The Stoics did not pursue calm for appearance. They pursued virtue. Wisdom allows you to see events without distortion. Instead of assuming insult, you examine evidence. Instead of personalizing disagreement, you consider perspective. Wisdom slows interpretation before it solidifies into emotion. Temperance gives restraint. It is the quiet strength to withhold unnecessary words, to choose silence when silence serves better than speech. Temperance is not weakness. It is control over excess. Courage is required as well. It takes courage to remain composed when others escalate. It takes courage to endure discomfort without discharging it through anger. Reaction feels easier. Governance demands steadiness. Justice ensures fairness in response. Even when pride is wounded, you refuse to respond with cruelty. You align action with principle rather than impulse. In doing so, you protect something deeper than ego: character. Emotional governance is often mistaken for suppression. Suppression denies feeling. Governance acknowledges feeling but refuses to be commanded by it. You do not pretend anger does not exist. You simply choose not to let it decide your behavior. Over time, this shift changes how you see yourself. You are no longer someone who tries to stay calm. You are someone who governs reaction. You become predictable in your composure. Others begin to rely on your steadiness. More importantly, you rely on it yourself. You know that provocation will not instantly destabilize you. You trust that disagreement will not define you. You feel anchored not because life is easier but because you are less easily shaken. This is the quiet elevation the Stoics sought. Not dominance over others but authority over self. And from that authority, strength becomes natural rather than forced. The impact of emotional discipline is rarely dramatic in a single moment. It does not arrive with applause, it accumulates quietly. Each time you pause instead of react, you strengthen credibility. Each measured response reinforces trust. Over months and years, that consistency becomes reputation. People begin to see you as stable, dependable, grounded. In professional environments, this reads as leadership. Authority is not declared through volume. It is demonstrated through composure. Contrast this with the reactive life. Emotions swing with circumstance. Decisions fluctuate with mood. Conversations escalate quickly. Trust becomes fragile. Even success feels unstable because it depends on everything going smoothly. When disruption comes, confidence fractures. In the governed life, stability compounds. You are less easily provoked, less likely to regret words spoken in haste. Relationships deepen because others feel safe around your steadiness. Disagreements do not automatically threaten connection. Peace of mind follows naturally, not because difficulty disappears, but because your internal response becomes reliable. Uncertainty feels navigable rather than overwhelming. Stress becomes a signal for composure rather than panic. Over time, the difference between reaction and discipline widens dramatically. One path builds volatility, the other builds quiet authority, and quiet authority, sustained long enough, becomes unshakable strength. At the beginning, we challenged the idea that reacting proves strength. Now the distinction is clear. Reaction is instinct. Discipline is power. The world will continue to provoke you. Criticism will come. Stress will arise. What changes is whether you allow those moments to command you. Epictetus reminded us that disturbance comes from judgment, not events. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to govern his mind. Stop reacting, not to suppress yourself, but to master yourself. If this perspective resonated, subscribe to The Dark Stoic for deeper lessons in disciplined strength and practical stoicism.